Russia followed a strictly pro-Western path until the mid to late 2000s and became a G7 member, expanding and reorganizing the existing G7 system into the G8 system. Russia was recognized by the international community as a wealthy power and a democracy where the people elected the president. At that time, Russia was also establishing its status around the world as a wealthy country based on natural resource exports. At that time, Korea also made active efforts to attract Russian tourists due to the rising value of the Russian ruble. In particular, it was in the mid to late 2000s that large hospitals in Korea earned huge amounts of foreign revenue by attracting Russian patients.
Even though Russia was doing well in the mid-2000s, geopolitician George Friedman predicted and described Russia's future negatively. George Friedman predicted that Russia would decline rapidly after 2015. One factor in Russia's geopolitical instability is the mistrust towards Russia from former Soviet allies in Eastern Europe, such as Poland and Czechia, which were satellites of Russia in the past. The former Soviet Union leadership imposed enormous political, cultural, economic, and social oppression on Soviet allies such as Poland and the Czech Republic. However, these Eastern Bloc countries are becoming pro-Western countries and have antagonism toward Moscow after joining NATO, which has acted as a geopolitical instability factor for Russia.
Russia concluded that the situation in which the former Eastern Bloc countries were joining NATO was Western expansionism, and in order to defend against this, Russia wasted a huge amount of money by pouring it into military power. Friedman argued that this is a huge waste and will squander Russia's enormous national wealth on the since the 2000s. In fact, he presented this analysis in the mid to late 2000s, and in 2014, Russia invaded Ukraine's Crimea Peninsula when the Sochi Winter Olympics were being held in Russia. As soon as it invaded Crimea, Russia was expelled from the G7 system and began to be subject to Western sanctions. Many Western experts have argued that the invasion of Crimea could actually deepen Russia's internal instability and increase the possibility of the disintegration of the Russian Federation in the long term. Experts have said that the economic difficulties and international isolation caused by the invasion of Crimea will amplify dissatisfaction in Russian society, which could eventually lead to a challenge to the Putin regime. In the end, the invasion of Ukraine in 2022 led to a situation in which Russia became an isolated country worldwide. Many scholars viewed Russia's invasion of Ukraine as a return to the Cold War world or the beginning of a new Cold War. There are also many observations that Russia's invasion of Ukraine was part of Russia's dream of restoring the Eastern Bloc, and that Putin is obsessed with Russia's former glory. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Russian society is experiencing serious unrest. Due to economic sanctions, prices are soaring, unemployment is increasing, and anti-war protests are spreading. This situation could make the breakup of the Russian Federation more likely in the long term. Additionally, Dr. George Friedman predicted that Russia's abnormal demographic structure and political instability would deepen before this situation occurred. Russia is experiencing a population decline due to low birth rates and high death rates, which could lead to a shrinking workforce and slowing economic growth. In the end, Russia came up with an analysis that its national downfall could continue like the Russian Empire of the Romanov dynasty or of the Soviet Union, which fell in the past. Both countries, Tsarist Russia under the Romanov dynasty and the Soviet Union, suffered economic difficulties, which aggravated the dissatisfaction of their people. In particular, Imperial Russia suffered a serious economic crisis after the Russo-Japanese War of 1905 and the February Revolution of 1917. The Soviet Union faced economic difficulties as it failed to reform its economic system following Gorbachev's reforms in the late 1980s. Both countries were made up of various ethnic groups, and each ethnic group had a desire for independence. In particular, Imperial Russia ruled over various ethnic groups, such as Poland, the Baltic states, and Ukraine, while the Soviet Union consists of 15 republics. Tsarist Russia and the Soviet Union had extremely concentrated power. In particular, Tsarist Russia maintained the Tsar's absolute power. The Soviet Union maintained the one-party communist system, and this concentration of power deepened political instability. Both countries fell due to certain historical events. In particular, Imperial Russia collapsed due to the October Revolution in 1917, and the Soviet Union collapsed due to the dissolution of the Soviet Union in December 1991. Many factors led modern Russia to experience national decline, like the Romanov dynasty's Tsarist Russia and the Soviet Union in the past. Economic difficulties, ethnic diversity, political instability, concentration of power, and historical events can be said to be the main causes, and these factors interacted with each other to accelerate the country's decline. George Friedman predicted that the consequences of Russia's coming collapse would be more devastating than the collapse of the two past empires. Friedman analyzed that the result would ultimately be the disintegration of the Russian Federation. Russia has been suffering long-term economic difficulties due to Western sanctions following the Ukraine war, which could lead to political instability.
In particular, sanctions from Western countries are taking a heavy toll on the Russian economy, aggravating people's dissatisfaction with economic hardship. Russia is made up of many different ethnic groups, each of which still has a desire for independence. In particular, some regions, such as Chechnya, are already waging separatist movements for independence. Russian politics are currently very unstable. President Putin's approval rating is falling, and the voices of his opponents are growing louder.
If President Putin were to fall from power, Russia could fall into serious political turmoil. Russia is a country with extremely concentrated power, with President Putin holding all authority and other political forces having little influence. Friedman predicts that this concentration of power could deepen political instability and eventually lead to the breakup of the Russian Federation. The world's attention is focused on whether Putin will overcome the current crisis and recreate the former glory of the Soviet Union by invading and annexing Eastern Bloc countries again, or whether Putin's hopes will be dashed by defeat in the Ukraine war. Thank you for watching. This is Matilda, and I worked alongside Gina and Tony.